Center. For those of you who don't know, it's on the south side of Chicago, and we have really been touched in a very intimate way by some of the events that have occurred in the last couple of weeks. The University of Chicago Police Force is the second largest police force in the state of Illinois after the city of Chicago. And so there have been all kinds of demonstrations around us on our campus about policing and the implications for the university and the community. All right, I'm going to turn it over now. Maybe we can start at the top. Allison?
Thank you, Shona. My name is Allison Osfed, and I'm a member of the APPIC Board of Directors. I'm currently serving in the vice chair role. In my day job, I'm a VA psychologist. I am no longer a training director myself, but I have served as a training director at 2 different VA healthcare systems, VA Puget Sound, American Lake Division in Washington State, and also VA Pacific Islands. And that's where I reside now and work, is at VA Pacific Islands in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I'm really glad to be with you all today talking about these important matters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Baker. I'm Executive Director for APPIC and also still see some patients over at the University of Texas Medical Branch Hospitals, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today and really appreciate everyone showing up here today at such a last notice here. It looks like there's 88 people on right now, so that's wonderful.
Good afternoon. I'm Clady Davis III. I'm the current chair on the APPIC board and serve as the training director at UC Berkeley in the Counseling Center. And just on the front end, I want to go ahead and thank Shona for organizing this at such a last minute. So thanks in advance, and thanks y'all for joining us today.
And I'm Daniel Hurley. I am also on the board. I am the APPIC treasurer. I, in my day job, work at Allina Health, which is in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. So touching very much close to home on this topic. So I just want to express my appreciation of everybody being here and being willing to have some conversations around these topics that are really important and can be more emotionally laden right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Garcia-Lavin. I'm currently the Director of Clinical Training for 2 doctoral programs, but I was an internship training director for 7 years prior to that, and I am at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I serve on the APPIC Diversity Committee, and I'm very excited to be here and part of this important conversation.
All right, next slide, please, Jeff. So as we prepared for this call, APPIC was reflecting on what are our values as an organization and what could we say to support our membership right now. And what we wanted to say is that we stand with our Black, Indigenous colleagues and trainees of color and against systemic and institutionalized racism and oppression. And further, we're committed to exploring our own identities and privileges and respecting the diversity and identity of all of our stakeholders. And I think part of this comes also in the form of committed and direct action. And so we really did want this call to be a joining experience. We want to discuss the impact of what's going on with everyone in our membership today at all levels of the training community, and to collaborate with you all in identifying resources and supports. And we know that you all are doing some wonderful things and thinking about making changes and taking direct actions in your own programs. And we wanted to benefit from hearing about that, and we wanted your colleagues to benefit from hearing about that too. So that's part of our purpose in being here today with you all. Next, the structure of our call. Anybody who may recognize the structure, we've organized key questions into categories, and what we will do is facilitate a discussion amongst everybody here on the call about each category. We really genuinely encourage participation, and we want to hear from you. In the interest of time, we do ask that we keep our comments to about a minute, and we may need to move on to another question or topic. And that's not meant to be offensive or an affront. It's really because we want to cover all of these materials, and we do want to hear from everybody about each topic. And then a final reminder that we want this space to be intended one that's one of mutual respect and openness to different perspectives, right? Because that's how we grow, from understanding the perspectives of others. So to that end, I will hand it over to my colleagues. We'll switch to the next slide and get the discussion going.
All right. So I think this slide really, in my mind, kind of captures the totality of what training directors have to contend with during this time. It is this acknowledgement that we have all of these different layers that we're trying to think of and manage. So the question being, how do you manage, or how have you been impacted by the events of the past 2 weeks? How about your programs, your colleagues in terms of your training staff, as well as your trainees? So again, acknowledging that there's a lot in that question, and really interested in seeing what people want to share. And with that, I will mute myself.
Don't forget to unmute if you want to share something.
Hi, Wendy Olsen here.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. You go ahead.
Oh, go for it.
Well, I'm Wendy Olsen. I'm from St. Elizabeth's Hospital in DC, and I kind of think that the silence reminds me of the silence I've been met with when I'm asking our faculty these similar questions. And I think it's hard to get started, and a lot of people have a lot of internal dialogue about what they want to say. I'm white, and so like, how do I say it? How do I acknowledge my privilege? How do I not make Black folks uncomfortable by doing so? All those things. So anyhow, I have lots of thoughts. We've been impacted quite a bit in our training program, and I see some change already happening that is for the good. I'll be quiet now.
This is Ashley Warhol. I'm the internship training director for Devereux, Massachusetts. And I think one of the hardest things has been that we're fighting kind of on two different fronts. We have still the COVID pandemic and our trainees being remote, and then our trainees also wanting to contribute to the support and causes that the Black and African American youth that we serve here at our residential program want to be part of. And so it's really been an issue for them to not be able to be on site and support their clients directly. But we've actually generated some really good activities and creative ways to help them get involved and to support their students in their need for advocacy and different events here, which has been an interesting process. But I think, you know, with the trainees we have here, it's been a lot of grappling between how do I support this important cause while also still needing to keep this pandemic in mind.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jack Terry. Can everybody hear me all right? Am I sufficiently unmuted? So I'm a training director out here at UMass Medical School and Worcester Recovery Center and Hospital, Worcester, Massachusetts. And what I've been impressed with a lot of things, but certainly the interns really hunger for, let's talk about this. Let's put it on the table. You know, we have a seminar series that in a schedule, and we sort of, well, no, let's put the seminar schedule on hold while we talk about things like racial bias or structural bias or structural racism. And so the interns are really strongly advocating, we need to process this. This isn't life as usual. We're not just going to go on with our regular seminar schedule, but we need the time, and we need to kind of hear your thoughts. We need to hear the interns' thoughts. And I really appreciated that big time, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. It looked like possibly Katie wanted to share something.
I'm happy to. I hate clashing verbally with other people. I have an incredibly diverse group of interns this year, all women, but from unusual groups, and they are really struggling. And they've mostly been struggling with isolation and separation and a desire to connect with each other. So finding time for them to do that. And then one of my interns is Black in Orange County, California, where the percentages are about 2%. And she's had an especially difficult time. And of course, lots of staff want to turn to her for advice. And she's struggling herself, never mind, wanting to take care of everyone else. Luckily, we had started a diversity questionnaire for the whole agency. 2 of the interns are especially interested in diversity, and we've been working to improve our education, our support, whatever we need. But this is a lot.
Thank you.
I'll share. This is Erica, and I'm an internship director and postdoc fellowship director in Denver, Colorado. So we have a fairly diverse group of interns this year, and I think like many cities, we're experiencing quite a bit of many nights of protests and other experiences. I think going on night 15, and so we had a pretty open discussion with our group about that. But one thing that I'm kind of sitting with is our agency itself serves a very diverse community in the Denver metro suburb area. And some of the feedback that staff gave to our CEO, who sent an email to all staff, was not pleasant. It was taken and received, but that also then trickled down to our trainees and kind of their experience of being supported or not being supported, and being in a place where they want the agency to take a stronger stance publicly than they are. So that's something that has come up this past week that I'm working on.
Thank you. It looks like we have some folks also sharing in the chat side. I think especially with Kimberly, you're sharing that comment about just being in a new starting the role in January, and just sending lots of support to you.
Hi, this is Meg Zeller from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. I'm a postdoc director, and it's just a reflection on my part. I've been the training director. This is the end of my 7th year, and what strikes me is what current events do to training, the rich opportunities they provide to lead and to learn, and that, I can list off all the things that have happened in the past 7 years, and how you experience things with these trainees that are unique, and it's unique based on the cohort, but on the event, and what an important job we have to be leaders. And yeah, that is it.
Thank you. It sounds like kind of a lot of folks being conscientious in the chat side about the importance of checking in on trainees, while also being conscientious of your own reactions and not having that being impacting in terms of unhelpful ways then of checking in with interns and postdocs, and especially I think trainees of color.
When I think of, this is Shona from Chicago. When I think of privilege, one of the issues that has come up for me recently which follows on what was just said, actually, is the idea of having the privilege to have a seat at the table. And so when I think about privilege, I think about my identities and my roles, but it really is such an important time and such an important job to be a leader and to set by example and to create a culture where this is talked about and is out in the open, and to make it necessary for everybody to participate.
I know at our site, like Kimberly, what she mentioned in the chat, we joined, I became a training director around the same time she did with COVID starting. And we've had our interns dealing with that, along with trying to address cultural issues in a culturally diverse intern cohort. They're also going to postdoc in places where they're worried about how they'll be received as culturally diverse from the location that they're going to be received or going to be living now. And on top of that, our site works with law enforcement, and that's also created different dynamics and trying to, I guess, come up with their professional identity and their personal identity as those merge together. And that's been a struggle in supervision. How do we work with individuals where we don't necessarily agree with every aspect of their job and how that impacts part of who I am, and yet still know that I need to work with them to help our clients in the best way possible.
Thank you. I think timeline-wise, it might be time for us to shift to the next question. Thank you, everybody, for sharing.
So when I was given this question, it resonated with me because I know it's a question we've asked ourselves. What components of your training program could benefit from being adapted in order to address issues related to privilege, racism, and oppression?
It seems like one idea that was already raised was sort of balancing what you are ordinarily doing and your regular schedule with creating space, especially at this time of year that comes with some challenges of its own, because there's things that you might have to get in. And so how are you able to manage creating opportunities for the interns to interact with each other and with the faculty and staff at your site?
So this is Kimberly Newsom, actually. So one of the things as a training director that I'm trying to change, and I was trying to change this even before all of the unrest, was to simply get more of our staff to participate in our diversity seminar. So as the only Black person on our training staff, I kind of became the default staff person in charge of the diversity seminar. And then I became the training director mid-year, and the diversity seminar has been myself and the trainees. Most of the staff hasn't actually actively participated in the diversity seminar. Everybody's busy, even though everybody knows when it is, but nobody makes the time to block their schedule to actually participate in this 1 hour a month even though diversity is a competency area and it's supposed to be interwoven throughout all of the training, but most of the staff don't prioritize it and actually make an effort to attend the diversity seminar. So one of the things that now that it's on everybody's mind, I got them to come to last week's diversity seminar because the conversation was about what was happening out in the world. So everybody managed to come to that one, but trying to get it to become the routine for it to not just be Dr. Newsom, the Black psychologist on staff, and the trainees in the diversity seminar, even though it's not just about race and ethnicity, it's about LGBT issues, it's about women's issues, it's about all issues of diversity. But how is it that I can't even get the rest of the staff to actually participate in the diversity conversation? So that's what I'm trying to, and that was even before I became the director of training. I was trying to get more of the staff to participate in the diversity seminar. So, so that's my big, task at hand, is trying to get more of the staff to actually participate in the diversity training in the training program. So if anybody's got any ideas for me, please bring it. I'm open to any suggestions.
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Newsom. This is Clady at Cal. I'm curious if your boss, the person you report to, what's their stance, values around diversity, and do they ever join the seminar?
He's always seeing a patient. He's behind his door with the do not disturb sign on, almost always at that time, seeing a patient.
Hi, Dr. Newsom. This is Mary. Oh, sorry, multiple people.
No, go.
I don't know who that was. My apologies. I can't see everybody. I am one of the board members also, and I wanted to just express my my concern for you, because it is a tremendous emotional labor that you'll carry. I was in a similar situation here early on in my career at Stanford, where the trainees were far more literate with diversity issues than the staff were. That has changed over time, but it really requires an institutional change. And I think that's part of where we're at this point in our development as a nation. The conversation I was in just an hour prior was really reflecting on, well, what is anti-Blackness? How have we been complicit in that, in the system? And how can we become accomplices to not allies? So really going beyond not even talking racism. I think we're using language to be, I think, a lot more honest and clear and direct about where we're at. All of this has been happening all year, where the trainees actually read the book White Fragility in their diversity seminar. Lots of deep, meaningful, painful discussions, and now the staff has read the book as well. We have our own diversity, equity, and inclusion seminar. And so we've also been listening to a podcast from 1619. It's a historian who also talks a lot about how this nation is built on, again, anti-Blackness and white supremacy. So these are big, profound words I'm using, but they're also the language that we're using to talk about this. But it has required a tremendous amount of time, patience, understanding, awareness of our own fragility, and there have been some ruptures. It has been painful. So I share all that just because I empathize that it's a huge task for one person alone, and then the Black woman on staff to take on. And so certainly want to support you in thinking about how to create some changes in the institution to further support you in this work.
Dr. Gelman was going to say something as well. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Irina Gelman. I'm internship director at Pacific Psychology and Comprehensive Health Clinic in Portland, Oregon. Portland is a very white city, and it's also a city that has quite a strong activist base. We've had very significant protests in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and racial injustice. And so that's been really nice, and some of our interns have participated in that. I just wanted to echo Dr. Newsom's comment of the burden always falls on the Black or the faculty or a supervisor of color to do this work around diversity. And a similar situation exists in our program, where our diversity seminar with interns run by a supervisor of color, and the rest of the supervisors are not involved. And so I'm just echoing, I think, what somebody else just mentioned right before me, was the way that we're revamping that is creating a separate group for the supervisors. We're framing it like a journal club or a book club, where those discussions can be had, and we can all work on increasing our cultural competence and cultural humility. We are intentionally keeping it separate from the interns in order to keep the intern seminar as a safe space for them to explore their own identities, which is a lot of the work that happens in there. So, thanks.
May I say something?
Carmen?
Yes.
Yes, you may.
Hi, everybody. This is Carmen Cruz. I am the Internship Training Director at Texas Women's University. And I just have a brief comment about, adding to what Mary just mentioned in terms of it being institutional, similar to the parallel process of there's not one way to fix all of the institutional problems that we have in America. It's multi-pronged. And so one of the things we've done, in addition to some of the things also Dr. Gilman spoke to, in terms of sort of upping the ante for senior staff and for the psychologists on staff in terms of our hiring practices. And perhaps there's also setting dependency here, because university counseling centers are perhaps more typically going to have people that are going to be hired that want to do diversity work. That's also not true all the time. And so beyond the emotional labor of the racial ethnic minority, I think we all have a lot of personal stories related to that. I think that one thing that we've done over time in our leadership team is to make sure that every person that we bring onto the team has clearly expressed in their interview process of a multi-step process their dedication to training and supervision and multicultural competence attainment throughout their entire lives. And we ask very specific questions. So it is a top-down priority, I think, to have that support and not just be in that emotional labor all the time, having to be the responsible person because we happen to be of minority status. So it is a buy-in situation, I guess, just to add that.
Thank you. I think it's almost time for the next slide. There's been some wonderful additional suggestions posted in the chat box here. Things like roundtable discussions, CEs for faculty and supervisors, and several other ideas here. But I do think it's time to move on to the next question so that we're sure to have coverage of every important topic.
Thanks, Barbara. This is Clady again. So I have a question that really talks about how do we move from an academic exercise to action. And I also would acknowledge, and I think Carmen was alluding to this, that we don't all share the same values. We might be on the same side, but definitely to degrees, just like our interns and fellows come with different experiences around multiculturalism and diversity. I also want to acknowledge that we, as training directors, also are on that continuum with regards to our how we express a commitment to social justice. So the question I pose for this group is how do we move beyond just talking about diversity and social justice, but actually kind of make change where we are working. And I'll give an example. At Cal, what we did last week is we disrupted what we planned to do. We were supposed to have a presentation. We had been scheduled for over a month, and we said we cannot go on as business as usual. And the staff were invited to stand in solidarity for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to honor recognize the death of Mr. Floyd, as one example of doing something we typically would not do. We would go on as business as usual, and we did something like that after 9/11. It's like, how you doing? How you doing? And then back to work. And so I was really kind of proud of our organization, and I think there's a lot more work to do. But I'm curious, what are you doing, and what can you do, or we do, to disrupt the status quo on with which regards we're seeing right now, I think, across the country. Want me to reframe it? Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, out here in Worcester, doing a couple of things. We have a very integrated group of chaplains here that actively minister to our patients, our inpatients here. And we had one minister record his thoughts and inspirations on social justice and what each person, and this went out to the staff. It was aired through our channel network here in the hospital where everybody could see it. The other thing that the medical school did was they did a time of silence where a number of people gathered on a commons and just were silent for over 8 minutes. And we're going to have that happening here in the hospital tomorrow. We'll have a period of silence for 8 minutes and 40 seconds, you know, and just really kind of step out of the norm, step out of the routine, and be real conscious of what we're faced with and what we're dealing with and how we can step out. And that's been a common question for the interns is, I'm here in my room, I'm working remotely, I don't feel like I get out. I want to do something. I want to be part of something. I want to kind of stand and be recognized and let my voice be heard. And they're grappling with how best to do that, you know, but I appreciate their questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I imagine for our interns and fellows, it'll be different. I know I have some folks like that who want to be active, and other folks are saying, I'm just too tired. You know, I can't do anymore. And how do you balance? Some folks maybe need some permission to not do any clinical work given their own experiences, and other folks, how do we support them in doing something that's meaningful? And I do think, relating to this issue, I can imagine come November, December, January, whenever we're doing our interviews, that applicants will say, you know, how did your organization respond during these days of a national protest? And it seems like, based on what I'm seeing in the chat and what I'm hearing, folks have done some things that are disruptive that are going to probably lead to some applicants saying, oh, that's a place that does value diversity, is committed to doing something different. How about other folks?
One of the things that we've done training-wise is our interns next year, and I've got pushback, but that's okay. They're going to participate on subcommittees that work with community members more. It takes away from their productivity, but that's fine. They're gonna hear more from our community members with our cultural diversity teams. So they're gonna work with our African American subcommittee, our LGBT subcommittee. They're gonna go to those meetings. They're gonna hear what the community needs, what their experience has been with mental health, and then bring back ideas for change, because right now the primary people participating in those committees are not clinicians, and so it is not a clinical change. And this is another area where I know I've struggled with, because we had a great conversation about how our field is built on privilege. You can't go to trainings if you don't have privilege. Training is expensive. Internship is hard. It requires privilege. You know, you get paid very little to do a lot of work. Where you go, where you move, those things all require privilege. And it is a challenge, and certifications and things like that are things that we're now starting to explore. Is there a way we can build that into internship? Because if you don't have privilege, you don't have means to get those later. So is there a way that we can help with that in our training?
Good point.
Our organization had multiple events last week that took the place of business as usual. So within our department, within the medical center, within the community, the university community, and within the community, we also have created shared drive of resources, including information about virtual protests, because we're still worried about managing the risk of infection with large groups of people. So virtual protests, places where you can donate. And it really has been a beautiful thing to see the level of enthusiasm and collaboration with which everybody in the department, including all of our trainees, have come together to upload, to update this document. I did post it on the resource list at the end.
Thank you for that, Shona. Should we go to the next slide at this point? Yes, we will.
Okay. So most of you know I work here in central office for APPIC, and we certainly like to make resources available to folks, but I'm wondering what kinds of things that you might have available, and what kinds of things might be helpful for you. We would certainly be welcoming anything that you can provide to us that we can use as a resource for our members. Lots of people use those training resources, and we like to keep them current. So if you have some ideas or if you have some needs, please let us know what those are. I just want to mention that I'm here in Houston, and yesterday was the pretty day-long funeral process where we got to watch that on TV. I didn't go to that. It was in Pearland, which is where one of our staff members lives. And it was very interesting to hear how all that went and how smooth that was on one hand, and how many folks got to speak of the contributions of what is happening here and what they expect to help move this forward. And I'm hoping that this energy continues to move forward, because it is time for change. And I'm hoping that this is going to help move this forward.
It seems like the shorthand to Jeff's question is, how can we help you? What can we do? As an organization, what would you like to see from APPIC at this point?
A blunt answer from me is very direct guidance and maybe even advocacy for social justice to be part of our training programs, because that provides support when I go to my administration to take time away from productivity to do other things. When we say commitment to cultural diversity, it's pretty vague, and there's a push for online webinars or things where we can not take away significant portions of time, and social justice is not strictly advocated for in any of our guidelines. And so that being spelled out would be great.
That sounds great. Just to let people know that we are thinking of these things. We actually we're looking at our membership criteria last week and asking where we can fit in some clarification for how social justice or diversity can be more infused or reviewed by our membership committee, and ask the diversity committee to take a look at that and to help us take a look at how some of that might be revised or articulated in a way that would be helpful to people who are wanting to join APPIC or who want to continue to be members of APPIC. Other ideas out there that might be helpful? I do appreciate Michael's clarification there. I think that's a great idea. How to integrate social justice is one of those tricky kinds of things, and you want to advocate, but you tend not to want to disrupt. And I think this is a time that we have permission to disrupt and want to do this.
There's some chat activity, Jeff. I'll just share that folks are saying forums like these and more of them is a request and a way that APPIC can help. Forums like these for trainees specifically is also a suggestion that's been made in the chat. Additional trainings. I think there's a few others, but those are some of the chat activity comments that I've seen about helpful resources that APPIC could provide.
Yes, this pandemic has given us an opportunity to become kind of quasi experts on how to run Zoom or how to do Zoom. And for instance, we did the new training directors workshop on Zoom a few weeks ago, and at the meeting, if we would have held it in San Diego, we would have been limited to 100 people, but we had 240 people on the Zoom conference. So this may be a forum where we can do more of these activities because there is some interest out there, and it does give people an opportunity to attend these without having to travel somewhere, and they can log in and they can dual task, or they can listen, or they can learn, or they can contribute. And that's a great idea for continuing these forums. How are people's trainees doing? A couple of you mentioned that there's a little bit of pushback, and I guess some people are tired of being asked these questions, but I'm real curious from an APPIC's perspective, what's going on out there. I know the pandemic has really been the center of everything for feels like for years, but I know it's for a few months. But how are trainees doing? I know it's getting towards the end of the training year here, but a lot of times trainees feel pretty powerless, and I'm wondering if they're speaking up or how they're managing this, if you have a perspective on that.
I'd like to just get a sense of whether or not other people are dealing with my current situation and how they're doing it. I'm an Anglo. I am the training director at a site in Los Angeles. And because of the nature of our client population being about 70% Latinx, the majority of my interns actually, because we need the bilingual capacity, are also Latinx. And one of the things that we have spent some time taken away from another seminar that would have been just one of my boring agendas, but really working on their own experiences in a different ethnic heritage kind of group that has also been plagued with injustice and racism and oppression, and we all live in fear out here of, ICE raids, and then, some of the interns and a majority of their clients come from families that are mixed legal status in terms of being in the United States, and so they have a whole raft of things that have really come to the forefront for them in terms of process issues, because they're trying to help a different group and deal with the racism and social injustice and oppression that is occurring, but not directed toward their group, directed toward a different group, but they still have experienced all those kinds of things as well. And it's they're doing great with it, and we're having some great discussions, but it is a major energy sapper for a lot of them in terms of their psychological energy. And I'm just wondering if other people are experiencing that as well, where the complication in dealing with the current situation with the African American population is complicated by people being Latinx. So anyway, I'd just love to hear if other people are finding that.
Great.
This is Elena at FSU, and we've got a postdoctoral program in South Florida with most of our population are Latin, of some Central American extraction, as well as Haitian Creole speakers. And so we have a very diverse postdoc class. And some of those issues have come up here, particularly when we talk about this as a racial issue rather than as a, just in general discrimination issue, as a marginalized issue, because so many people have experienced discrimination. We have a great history in this country of doing that. It doesn't matter what the last group is, we discriminate against them, right? And so, but they may not necessarily be African American or not identify themselves as a person of color because they're European. I myself am first generation European, but so I don't see myself as a person of color, but certainly as a Latina woman have had a lot of experience in academia of being, an N of one. And so we also are struggling here with that in terms of empowering them to help with their own patients and with themselves in terms of just identity, who they are and how they fit into the general society, and then really giving them permission. All of our group supervision for the last 2 weeks, we've just stopped whatever it was, and this is what we're talking about. And then also helping them about how to approach their patients and be proactive with their patients. We're in a primary care setting of broaching this subject so that the patient knows that they're open to hearing about it, and giving them, just talking about skill set. How do you talk about it? How do you broach it with a patient, and checking on your patients on how it's impacting them. So I think there are a lot of layers to this that we're all going to have to face.
Yes, I think that's very helpful, Elena, to hear that perspective. Are there other ideas before we move on here?
I was just thinking that, we have a diversity seminar that spans the whole year, and I'm feeling this urge to look at every topic as important and wanting to front load everything into the first couple months of training, which I know is not helpful. But suddenly I'm struck by, well, why is this unimportant enough to be left until May? So thinking more about how we can cover some of the didactic stuff up front and then leave space for experiential, practical, what are you doing conversations throughout the year. So that's sort of where I am today as I reflect on graduation tomorrow.
Wow. I'm also curious, a number of folks, this is Clady again, in the comment have talked about it'd be great to have interns join forums like this. And I'm wondering if you mean with training directors online as well, or something separate, because I think we've been pretty intentional about separating a training director conversation from interns and fellows, their trainees. And so I'd be curious if folks could just comment on that. That'd be helpful feedback for us.
I made a comment in the chat as well that we have organized several conversations in the last couple of months in partnership with APPICs. And so we could certainly look at having these discussions through APPICs because they have greater reach than we do. And I think that might be a more appropriate forum that would protect the integrity of this space for training directors.
I think this is Eric Schwartz from Sarah Reed Children's Center. I'm the training director for our doctoral internship, and so I made a comment kind of on that line. And one of the things maybe I didn't articulate it well enough, was one of the things I was thinking of is, in Pennsylvania we've tried to do some training across internship sites across the state, and to use resources from other internships to benefit all interns. And so I was thinking more generally of training in diversity and the kinds of topics in social justice that we're talking about today, and how can we nationalize using resources within the training director community and the faculty of internships and postdoc community to somehow marshal that for the benefit of all the interns and postdocs.
That's helpful, and maybe even something that's site specific. I saw a comment earlier about some challenges being in the VA and doing some diversity work, which may look different for those of us in counseling centers. But I appreciate that comment.
I'm just going to remind everyone that this is being recorded, and we will have it up on our training resources page. If you would like to have interns or trainees take a look at this or listen to it, it's certainly fine to do that. Shona, I know you wanted to say a few more things here in our last 5 minutes or so.
Thank you, Jeff. I have added some resources here that we found particularly useful. We're going to post a PDF of these slides on the website, or we can email them to you. If you email one of us, we're happy to send them out.
I'll probably just send them out to everyone that registers.
To everyone. Thank you, Jeff. That would be helpful. We do have, can you move on to the next slide? We do have a post-call evaluation because really we take your feedback very seriously in designing future programming. So we have a couple events that are planned for the next few weeks. Many of us are entering this transition time and thinking about how we orient our new groups of interns virtually. So that's coming on June 19th. 2 weeks from this Friday. Actually, that's next Friday, I'm sorry. We will be talking about virtual recruitment and selection because we think that we'll be making some emphatic statements about having virtual interviews in this next selection cycle, which is going to be an enormous learning endeavor for all of us. And for those of you who don't know, we had hopes to unveil the new and improved APPIC at the conference, which we weren't able to do. But we have a big APPIC conversion that will be used for this upcoming training site. So we will have some events that show you how to use the new APPIC. I just wanted to add one other thing. I have been a training director for a number of years, and the first time I went to the APPIC conference was actually only in 2016. And when I got there, I found myself wondering, how is it that I didn't know that this existed? Because these are my people. And I just really felt so supported and like part of a training community. And that offering these webinars and these calls is something that's very important to me because I don't want anyone to feel like they have to go 6 or 8 years without feeling like there are other people who know exactly what your job looks like and who can support you. So I will stop talking there. Any other questions? We have 4 minutes left. So if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
I'll add, I mean, the first question we had was, in addition to how has this impacted your program and training staff, it was also how has it impacted you? And I guess I would just encourage all of us to be mindful that the COVID and the national outrage right now does impact us. And it's critical that if we're gonna train the next generation of psychologists, that we're also modeling how we take care of ourselves and each other during these challenging times. And I will end with that.
All right then, well, thank you very much. The slides will be posted on the website. We're gonna send out a link to the post-call evaluation and look for more information on our upcoming offerings.
No, that's actually not true. You
Thank you, everyone.
that's not
Thank you.